Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Cancel Vacation. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a social justice, social media mob looking to cancel her in this all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Cancel Vacation in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, A Steam Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Steam series adventure. Get your copy of The Steam Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. Is this the end of the era of woke? That's the critical question I have to ask after reading several articles on The Atlantic, Business Insider, and the New York Times, and watching a video on Clownfish TV that declares that the era of woke is officially dead. Now, this era of what people call woke, or the SJW or social justice warrior era, started in the early 2010s as a lot of millennials started to enter corporate America. And as millennials started to enter corporate America, they hoped to present a narrative as related to changing the media and the narrative of the media to produce content that would show diversity and inclusion. And as they looked to go out here and present media that presented diversity and inclusion of black people, minorities, women, and people of different sexual orientations, what they hoped to do was create a more diversified picture of media as related to the activism that these individuals said that they were a part of. Now, as these individuals were looking to promote their ideas of diversity and inclusion, many venture capitalists thought that this was going to be the next big thing in media. And because they thought it was going to be the next big thing in media, these venture capitalists basically poured billions of dollars into looking to make things more diverse and inclusive. And as they look to make things more diverse and inclusive in media such as Hollywood went out here and started hiring a lot of these activists and social justice types looking to try to capitalize on what they thought was going to be the next big trend in media because of information that they heard chattered on social media. And as they hired these individuals, not really critically looking at their experience and their background as related to media, they basically hired these individuals to basically meet what they called so-called diversity check boxes as related to race, ethnicity, gender, and sexuality. And as they hired these individuals based only on their race, gender, sexuality, or sexual orientation, what these people did was come into positions that they clearly didn't have the experience for and didn't have the qualifications for. But that didn't matter for the venture capitalists who went out here and put these people in positions at many media platforms. It didn't matter to them because they had created this covert contract where they believed that they were going to score huge profits from the next generation of customers by going out here and again passively hiring these individuals for representation and then aggressively using them to push an agenda towards customers as related to their upcoming products like the Star Wars sequel trilogy and the race and gender swapped characters that they were going to feature in TV shows like the CW Supergirl, and they hope to push products on people like the all-new, all-different Marvel. Unfortunately, what happened with this entire campaign is that this campaign basically wound up alienating the original base of core customers for these pop culture products, such as the core base of heterosexual white men. And as a result of them alienating that core customer base of heterosexual white men, many of these companies didn't go out here and get the profits they thought they were originally going to get. And that's what started a trend in the mid-2010s known as Get Woke, Go Broke, And many YouTubers on social media made a lot of money making videos talking about these so-called, what they call social justice or woke products that featured race-swapped and gender-swapped characters, and talked about how many of these race swap and gender swap characters basically were just poorly done characters, and many of them were poorly done characters because they were basically made to make us believe that this is a new character, but it wasn't a new character. It was basically they went out here and killed an original character to replace it with a tokenized version of that character. And as they tried to force this tokenized character on audiences of mostly white males, those white males vehemently rejected those characters. Moreover, casual customers were not really interested in these characters, and this is what led to Hollywood going into a serious state of decline that continued on for the last 7 to 8 years. And after suffering multiple losses and putting studios on the brink of bankruptcy, many are now saying that the era of woke is over because the studios basically can no longer afford to sustain it, and they don't have that venture capitalist money anymore invested in it anymore. And since they don't have that venture capitalist money invested into looking to push this agenda anymore, because the studios and the businesses have taken on tremendous losses that have been presented on channels like the World Class BSers, who have shown us the mountain of merchandise for products like Star Wars, Marvel Legends, and many other brands that are sitting on clearance at Ollie's right now because they wanted to push the diversity and inclusion of social justice into the pop culture franchises like Star Wars and the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Many of those companies that invested in this type of agenda basically have hemorrhaged billions of dollars over the last 8 to 10 years. And since they've hemorrhaged so much money in losses, studios like Disney and Paramount are on the brink of bankruptcy. And with these studios on the brink of bankruptcy and no more venture capital in place to keep the agenda going, what has happened is that now we have many businesses like movie studios and TV studios and publishers now rethinking what they're trying to sell to the few customers they have, and hoping to try to find a way to rebuild their audience and win back the customers that they alienated over the last decade. And that's the main reason why many are now declaring that the era of woke is over, because big business basically can no longer afford to sustain this era. And over the last year, as studios like Marvel Studios have taken multiple losses from movies flopping like Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and the Marvels winding up flopping at the box office, Kevin Feige, the executive who runs Marvel, is now looking to terminate all of these activists, according to some rumors. And many other companies are getting rid of their activists by having layoffs at different websites like Fox and Vice. And as a result of there being no more venture capitalists out here to finance these people on the payroll, many of these activists and social justice types are basically have been terminated from their jobs. And some are speculating that the WGA and SAG strikes were basically used to basically be a way to get these individuals out of the entertainment industry, that the WGA and SAG strikes were basically used to basically get these individuals out after it was proven that these individuals cannot really produce any content, and after the streaming bubble wound up popping due to these individuals basically being hired for jobs that they clearly weren't qualified for. Now, when I look at the whole, what they call woke situation, this was not about any sort of real social justice. This was all about individuals in big business looking to capitalize on what they thought was going to be a popular trend on social media. And as they were hearing all the chatter on social media, they thought that that chatter was something that they could capitalize on to make their business profit. But what these individuals didn't understand was two things. One, they didn't understand that the internet wasn't the real world, one. And two, they didn't understand that when it comes to many of what they call these social justice types, they lacked something that I have, and that is experience. That's the thing that basically was the foundation of the entire woke era being a failure, was the fact that many people overestimated the reach of social media, because many people, they sat there listening to people on Twitter and thought because that person had a big following, this was someone that they could be, you listen to as an influencer that could generate sales in the real world. And however, what happened with these individuals is, yes, they can make a lot of noise online, and they can make a lot of clickbait articles that could get clicks and make videos that can get views, but they could not drive foot traffic into a retailer, nor could they go out here and get orders placed for items online. No, these individuals, yes, they could talk a good game online, but they could not persuade people to go out and start spending money on products online. And that's where we get the whole get woke, go broke as related to its foundation. Yes, these social media types could make, again, they could make huge noise as related to getting likes and getting retweets, or go out here and get lots of likes on places like Facebook and Instagram. But when we start to look at their sales, their numbers just weren't there. And that was shown by the, again, mountains of merchandise that were not selling as related to lines like Star Wars and the Marvel Cinematic Universe in its later years of Phase 4 and Phase 5. It really was shown there. Moreover, it was shown in the thousands of comic shops that wound up closing due to the all-new, all-different Marvel. Many comic shops basically just went out of business all across this country, including legendary ones like Jim Hanley's Universe here in New York, because the content that was in those comics couldn't drive foot traffic. Yes, they passively had representation, but many of the groups that they were targeting with that representation were not coming to the comic shops. And sadly, what happened as a result of this, what they call SJW woke agenda, is that the comic book industry wound up missing out on the greatest opportunity to reach the largest audience in history with the popularity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because people who were in that whole thing at Disney were all focused on social justice and hired all of these inexperienced writers to write these replacement characters. And as a result, the Marvel Comics publishing division missed out on one of the biggest opportunities to expand its reader base ever since the days of the 1980s. And even worse, you had many franchises wind up losing traction and losing its audience. We saw the Terminator franchise wind up falling apart due to that horrible Terminator movie that came out with that female Terminator. We saw other franchises wind up falling completely off because they wanted to go out here and give us token diversity characters, which had the flash of representation, but did not have the substance of story. And we saw a lot of them, again, winding up losing because they hired all of these screenwriters who were a certain ethnicity, a certain gender, or a certain sexual orientation, but not focusing on the core of story. And that's where the inexperience of what they call these woke writers and producers really started to impact the business. That was the other aspect that many of the venture capitalists weren't critically thinking about. No, they were just looking to hire whatever activists they saw on social media without ever checking their background to see if they had any sort of professional experience. No, they went out here and just hired people based on their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, or their gender, and basically this was their reason for qualification, not that person's background. And an example of this could have been shown in the She-Hulk Attorney at Law series, where they hired a woman named Jessica Gao because she was Asian and a woman, but had no experience whatsoever as related to screenwriting, did not do any research on being an attorney, was not a comic fan who knew the character. They hired this woman to be the showrunner for She-Hulk Attorney at Law, and it turned out to be one of the worst shows in the history of the streaming service Disney Plus. And this was further compounded with a Star Wars series called The Acolyte, where Harvey Weinstein's Alphabet assistant was hired just on the sole thing of her being an Alphabet person. Same thing with the lead actress. I forget what her name is, but the whole thing is she was hired basically for being an Alphabet person, but there was no focus on the Star Wars lore at all, and it became one of the worst shows in the history, again, of Disney Plus, and one of the lowest rated Star Wars series on Disney Plus. And that's the core component of why many of what they call these woke shows wound up failing. But I don't call these shows woke. I will say that these shows were made by inexperienced people, because that was the big problem with the social justice woke agenda, is that the studios and these publishers hired inexperienced people with no professional experience, no life experience, and could not go out here and again represent the lores that they were working on. No, these people had no understanding of how the world worked. I mean, these were basically young people coming out of college, and I, as someone who came out of college in 1994, I could tell you back in 94, I knew absolutely nothing about life outside of what my teachers told me, and I wouldn't be qualified to write anything at that point. No, I wasn't ready at that point, but you need years of life experience to learn how to write stories. You need to be under people to learn the craft of writing, and that's something Hollywood, again, I believe deliberately didn't want to do, because I don't really believe they were interested in any sort of actual diversity and inclusion. No, what I believe was happening here as related to this so-called woke agenda was a plan to basically show that this is why we don't go out here and hire blacks and so-called minorities. And again, passively, they went out here and hired blacks and minorities, but aggressively what they did was recruit the most inexperienced and incompetent people, passing by more qualified individuals like myself who have years of life experience, years of understanding the lore of things like the Marvel Universe, the Star Trek universe, or Star Wars universe, people who have watched the films and have deconstructed the films and could add to the lore. They didn't want to hire qualified people like myself, so what they wanted to do to keep the whole system of white supremacy in place was go out here and hire the most unqualified people. And as they hired the most unqualified people, it was all about making a statement, similar to what many companies did during the era of affirmative action. During the era of affirmative action, many companies, what they did was go out and hire the most unqualified black person, and hire the most unqualified black person to passively talk about representation and inclusion, but aggressively wanted to see that person fail. And as they wanted to see that person fail, they wanted to use that as an excuse to never hire another black person, especially a heterosexual black male. They hired these grossly unqualified people because they didn't want to hire qualified black talent. And that's something that I believe that Hollywood was deliberately doing during this era of woke, where they talked passively again about diversity and inclusion, but aggressively ignored qualified black men and women and people who had a passion and had a craft for the business. I mean, a lot of people are saying, oh, they use this WGA and SAG strike to flush these people out, but is there any effort to start bringing in qualified black people to be showrunners like myself, or bringing qualified people to be screenwriters. I mean, there's a lot of qualified folks out here who were never about a social justice agenda, because I'm not about a social justice agenda. I've been publishing stories for years that feature characters that are black, and I have been publishing stories for years that feature characters that are black, and I haven't been pushing a social justice agenda because I go out here and I do the research. I go out here and I look up the information to make sure that everything fits. I mean, I recently got through writing a book, Spinsterella, Goth Girl Summer, where I have a character who's a goth who is black, and I go in depth on that and talk about the year 2000, because the story is set in the year 2000, and I go out here and I put the work in, and sadly, while these same people who talk about they don't like woke talk about merit, but the whole thing is, when they see a black creator like myself, they're not interested in supporting work that is, again, meritoriously is high quality. I mean, a lot of people, again, are really disingenuous as related to this, what they call woke era being over, and they were disingenuous from day one, because while the activists talked about representation, they really were not about representing qualified black people. No, what they were was about, again, out here, they were hired based on the idea of, again, having them sabotage real opportunity. That's what this was all about. You'll hire the inexperienced person. The inexperienced person will go out here, and yes, they'll make a lot of clickbait articles on and get a lot of controversy on social media, but they won't be working organically towards trying to build an audience for a black character or a character that is of another race. No, they don't want that out there, because, again, the system of white supremacy wants you looking at white men and white women. So I see where there's a lot of disingenuousness as related to people and in the woke era, because a lot of the people who said that they were social justice were really a bunch of racists. A lot of them were producing content that was on the level of the content I used to see back in the late 70s and the early 80s on shows like Different Strokes. That's the way a lot of these characters came across, because of the paternalistic view of many of these creators who were talking representation, but they weren't really looking to hire qualified black creators. No, they would find a bootlick like a Ta-Nehisi Coates, who basically fit their whole narrative, but they wouldn't come to a Sean James who would come out here and try to give you a balanced picture of black life, or any other creator who would give you a balanced picture of life. I mean, there are Latino creators who can give you a balanced picture of Latino life. There are Asian creators who could give you a balanced picture of Asian life, but they don't go to those creators. No, they deliberately went to these activists because it was all fitting into their what I call an anti-black agenda, because it really was an anti-black agenda, because the whole era of social justice basically, again, was all about trying to find these people who basically fit their agenda, because they didn't want to see black people rising to power creatively the way Barack Obama came into the presidency. But the whole thing is, Barack Obama wasn't really representing black people. No, he was, again, a guy who was basically representing white supremacy's ideals of black, but not our own. But the whole thing is that the whole woke agenda basically fell flat on its face, and again, fell flat on its face because the audience rejected it, and it rejected it because the real world is not social media, and that's the hard lesson corporate America and venture capitalists learn, that the real world is completely different from the world of social media. And in the real world, people want people who they can relate to. They want to see that in their media. They want to see real people who represent the ideas that they have, and they don't want to have representation forced down their throats. And that's why these studios, again, were put on the brink of bankruptcy by their whole social justice agenda. They were put on the brink of bankruptcy as related to their social justice agenda. And now that they're basically on the brink of bankruptcy, they want to end what they call the woke era. And they're declaring this era over now that they've basically lost billions of dollars and lost years of time and damaged lots of formerly popular franchises and alienated customers. And now what they want to do to try to get the train back on the track is in the aftermath of these SAG and WGA strikes, start firing all the activists out of Hollywood. And after they fire all the activists, they want to fire all the activist journalists. And after they fire all the activist journalists, what comic companies are going to do is start firing the activist comic book writers. And a lot of these activists are going to be on the unemployment line as these companies start trying to regroup, hoping to rebuild their audience. But it might possibly be too little, too late at this point, because one of the things I've learned from being in business is that once you alienate customers, it's hard to get them back. And in a lot of cases, you need to get 2 customers back to win back the one who was a seasoned customer. That's what I learned from seeing Marvel Comics go out here and do that disastrous reboot back in 1996 after they canceled their iconic titles, The Avengers, Fantastic Four, Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor. They basically had to try to regroup, and they were not able to rebuild that momentum. And by 2001, they basically stumbled and fell and could not get that momentum back as related to the original 6-figure comic book sales. No, they were basically struggling for over the last 2 decades, and now comic sales are at an all-time low, because once you get that momentum, you can't really get, once you lose that momentum, you can't really get it back. And it would take some really strong original movies to come out of the studios, but many of the studios, again, are stuck in sequel hell, as I call it, because all they do is sequels, remakes, and reboots. And if you want to get the audience back, you got to come out here with something fresh and take some risks. And sadly, after the disastrous failure of Woke, many of these studios and publishers are hesitant to take risks, and that leaves the market really open at this point for anyone. So when I look at this whole era of Woke ending, it really is just not really what they call woke. It's just the studios realize that you can't hire inexperienced people to represent your business, because again, when it comes to business, you need seasoned professionals who know what they're doing. You need seasoned professionals in place who know how to write a screenplay, know how to target audiences, know how to appeal to customers. You need somebody who has a social media presence that's open and inviting, like I try to have on my social media. I try to be as open and inviting by only doing book promotions and possibly talking about different topics. I try now to even stay away from politics at this point, because what I want to do is keep trying to sell to customers and again reach all of the customer base. And that's something the social justice types didn't understand. They thought they could bully and shame people into going to watch their movies and buy their merchandise, but you can't shame people, because shaming people isn't selling, and going out here and looking to attack people isn't selling. No, selling is about having the confidence to believe in your product, having the confidence to believe in your product, to go out here and know that it's the best work you have done. Know it's the best product you can put together. Know that you've gone out here and put the best effort out here. That's what selling is all about, believing in your product. And that was one of the things that basically tripped up all the social justice types. Yes, they believed in a cause, but they never really believed in their product. And it showed with what was on their pages and what was on screen. These people didn't believe in anything outside of so-called diversity and inclusion, but sadly they didn't show a reason that would make people answer a critical question I have to ask before I put fingers to the keyboard, and that is, why should we care? Why should the audience care about seeing some person like a Rey in Star Wars, or the female Terminator, or the other takes that they've put on different characters? I mean, why should people care about this if it's not going to be true to the source material? And what's really sad is that 20 years before this era of woke, we had the Catwoman movie of 2004, which basically tried to do the same thing with the race swap Patience Phillips that Halle Berry played, and that flopped hard. But sadly, Hollywood didn't see the big picture as related to that and see the big picture of what was coming. No, they bought into the rhetoric that was going on social media of, oh, there's people who want representation, but the whole thing is those people didn't represent at the theaters, they didn't represent at the comic shop, they didn't represent at the bookstore, they didn't represent at the streaming service, and now their entire era of those people is over because business can't run on people telling people what they want and not showing up. No, business can't run on people talking on social media because people can talk on social media with these Obama phones they get for free. They can talk on social media at the library on the Wi-Fi. So that's not an indicator to a person being a paying customer. No, now business is learning the difference between the real world and the virtual world, that you have to have paying customers. And now they're looking to appeal to the paying customers. And that's the main reason why many people are walking away from these inexperienced types who say that they're woke, because they made their company go broke. And now that their company is basically on the brink of going out of business altogether, they're looking to try to get their business together and basically walk away from what they call the woke era, but I call the age of incompetence. And what they're looking now for are people who are competent, I'm hoping at this point, because that's the only way you're going to get this business on track and come out of this era of what they call woke, and wake up to the reality that in business you have to have real customers who go out here and spend real money, and you have to build bases of customers that spend real money if you hope to be able to continue doing business in this world. Now, I have my business, the SJS Direct Imprint, and in that business I have a world called the SJS Direct Universe, filled with lots of action-packed fantasy stories for readers of all ages and all walks of life. And you can pick those books up, such as the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Haynes series, my vampire novel, Eternal Night, my business novel, Recipe for Success, my black sorority novel, The Thetas, and many other great books like the Goth series, the Spinsterella series. You can find all those books on Amazon.com, along with my comic John Haynes at Death's Door in digital format and A Steam No Good Deed in digital format. You can find those comics all on Amazon.com, along with my paperbacks and ebooks. And you can also find all of that content on other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me make more videos talking about the entertainment industry, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Illuminati. The man who rules the world takes on the head of the global elite in this all-new action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes Illuminati in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.